Thank you. I'll find you a wife.
My hometown, the cursed land. Part 5, the mysterious, eerie beggar woman. Have you ever done a good deed for a stranger, only to have them follow you in an unwanted way for the rest of your life? That's what happened to my grandfather. My grandfather was born and raised in Bac Bien, a quiet riverside village on the banks of the Red River, just north of Hanoi. He came from a poor farming family. Like most village boys, he didn't go to school much and spent his youth tending rice fields and working the land. He was kind, quiet, not cold, just distant. His only passion was the river. Every single day, rain or shine, in summer or winter, he would wade out to the mid-river sandbars. Nobody knew what he did out there. They only knew he was a strong swimmer who could dive deep and swim far. But sometimes he would be gone for hours, and no one could say where he'd been. When he was 13, a strange beggar woman wandered into the village. The locals said she was from the mountains. Some claimed she had committed terrible sins in her hometown. Others whispered she was a witch. Rumor had it she was once thrown into a river as punishment, but by some cruel twist of fate, she didn't die. Instead, she came back half mad and haunted. She drifted from town to town until she ended up in Bac Bien. She wandered the village aimlessly, lunging toward children and stroking their cheeks while laughing hysterically. People avoided her like the plague, except my grandfather. He was just a child back then, but for some reason, he wasn't afraid of her. He'd quietly offer her food, sometimes a piece of boiled cassava, other times a guava or an ear of corn. His family tried to stop him, but he kept doing it anyway. Back then, the Red River still had 3 sandbars, not 2. The beggar woman made her home in a dense bamboo grove on one of them, just beneath the Long Bien Bridge, far from where anyone dared to go. That year, a massive flood swept through the village. When the waters receded, they found her body wedged inside the bamboo. Her face was ghostly pale, her body bloated, but her mouth was curled into the same smile she always wore while alive. No one wanted to move her, so they buried her right there, beneath the bamboo where she died. Years passed. Then came the Communist Revolution. My grandfather would often walk to the village square at night to hear speeches and announcements. One night he was walking home alone. To get there, he had to pass by that same bamboo grove, the place where the beggar woman had once lived and died. He wasn't scared. As a boy from the river, he'd seen his fair share of drowned corpses. He was used to death, but that night, something was off. As he walked under the trees, moonlight filtered through the leaves, casting ghostly shadows over the path. Suddenly, he heard a soft laugh, faint but chilling. He kept walking. Then came a voice, low, raspy, and distant.
Dee, do you have a piece of cake for me?
He froze. Cold sweat ran down his spine. Then the laughter came again, sharper this time. From within the bamboo, her voice echoed, whispering his name, as if she were standing right beside him. A gust of wind blew through, parting the leaves. And in that exact moment, moonlight fell on a spot just beneath the trees, where her unmarked grave was buried. There he saw a bundle of incense, still burning. He looked up. She was standing on top of the bamboo, staring straight at him. He later said it felt like his heart stopped beating. She grinned at him, and in a voice that seemed to ride the wind, she said,
I'll find you a wife.
Then she vanished. He returned home pale as a sheet, didn't say a word. After that night, he spoke even less, and he started visiting the river sandbar more often. No one knew what he did out there, and no one asked. But what they didn't know was that her promise, I'll find you a wife, was not a blessing. It was a curse. a curse that would haunt my grandparents for years to come. Subscribe to the channel to follow the next part about the mysterious events that happened before and after my grandparents' wedding.
Come here. It's me.
My Hometown Cursed Land. Part 6, The Wedding and the Restless Dead. What if a soul, one that refuses to leave, clings to you, haunts you, and tears your life apart? All because they believe they're repaying a favor? A favor you never asked for and never wanted. This is a true story, one that continues the strange and terrifying events from earlier chapters. It happened in Bac Bien Village, right along the Red River in northern Vietnam, a place where the floodwaters return every year, carrying in the dead. My grandmother was once the daughter of a wealthy family, but after her father passed away, the inheritance vanished and she and her sisters returned to their hometown, living like everyone else, planting corn in the river fields. Villagers whispered, "Girls from rich families won't survive the hardship," but my grandmother worked hard and never complained. My grandfather was 6 years older than her. From boyhood to manhood, all he knew was working the land and swimming in the river. The sun and wind bronzed his skin and carved his muscles like a true farmhand. Girls in the village used to joke, "Whoever can bring tea back from the riverbank to Mary wins life." But he paid no attention. His only companions were the muddy fields and the violent currents of the Red River. Each year, the Red River floods for 3 months straight. Half the village goes underwater, and each flood brings bodies, cows, pigs, chickens, and people. They wash ashore, tangled in reeds, lodged under bamboo groves. When the water recedes, the young men bury them, just in case someone comes looking for a lost loved one. In 1956, the floods were the worst anyone had ever seen. Almost the entire village evacuated. Only a few men stayed behind to collect driftwood. One of them was my grandfather. That day, while dragging a log ashore, he heard screaming. A girl was being pulled away by the current. Everyone froze, but he dove in without a word. He knew the river like the back of his hand. He fought the current for what felt like forever, and finally dragged her to shore. It was N, a girl from the same village. She had slipped while gathering her things and fell into a whirlpool. By sheer luck, she caught hold of a floating tree trunk. Without my grandfather, she would have ended up like the others, lifeless, drifting in the reeds. My grandfather didn't think much of it. He wasn't looking for thanks. But from that day on, N came to see him every day, only at noon and twilight, never in the morning, never at night. She brought water, cooked fish, cleaned his hut on the riverbank. Even though she was engaged to another man, she kept coming. My grandfather rejected her over and over, told her to stop. The village started to talk. Eventually, he left the river for good, took a job at a pen factory in the city and abandoned the hut. There he met my grandmother, beautiful, strong. They fell in love quickly and planned to marry. That's when N returned and asked to meet him one last time. At the riverbank, she told him something he would never forget. "Ever since you saved me, every noon and dusk, a woman comes to get me. She limps, and her voice is raspy. She tells me to cook for you, clean for you, care for you. I don't want to go, but I can't stop. I still love my fiancé, but I'm no longer in control of myself." My grandfather felt a chill run down his spine. N cried and said, "My life is no longer mine." Then she ran off. The next morning, villagers found her hanging inside the abandoned river hut, the one my grandfather used to stay in. That night was their wedding night. A black cat appeared out of nowhere. It jumped onto the rafter, looked my grandfather in the eyes, and said, in a human voice,
It's me.
7 times. Years later, my grandmother suddenly lost her mind. One night, after she'd gone missing for some time, to the Tru Quy Psychiatric Hospital, as told in a previous episode, she returned, But when she stepped into the house, my grandfather didn't see her. He saw N standing beside her, was an old beggar woman, one my grandfather had once given food to. The beggar looked him in the eye and said, "It's me." That night, my grandfather silently lit incense for a headless general statue on the family altar. As the third stick burned out, the wind howled from the riverbank. The door blew open, then slammed shut. Only then did my grandfather begin to tell us the truth. The Red River, though peaceful by day, hides things the mind can't comprehend. Even the most skeptical members of my family, like my uncle, eventually came face to face with things they could no longer explain. Subscribe to the channel to hear the next chapter. You'll hear what happened to my uncle when he met a spirit who refused to move on. My Hometown Cursed Land, Part 7, The Ghost of the Drowned. In Vietnamese folklore, there's a terrifying entity called the water ghost, the spirit of someone who drowned tragically and couldn't move on. Locals believe these restless souls gather at noon and night, searching for a living person whose soul matches theirs, so they can drag them into the water and take their place in the afterlife. Years after the eerie stories my grandparents had told, this time it was something I witnessed with my own eyes. It happened right in front of me, on a calm stretch of the Red River, where my friends and I used to gather. On the Gia Lam side of Hanoi, near Ngoc Tui, there's a long, sandy riverbank exposed when the water recedes. Back then, when the river's level dropped, the land revealed itself like a promised land. Vast, fertile. Locals would grow vegetables, harvest corn, dig sand. Even trucks could drive in. Each year, after the river rose and receded again, it left behind a natural lake, a deep pit filled with rainwater, lying close to the riverbank. My house was only about 100 meters from that spot. My grandfather used to take us kids there to learn how to swim. We loved it. It was clean, calm, and safer than the river's main current. But that land had an unspoken rule. Never go near the river at noon or at night. No one really explained. They just said, the water ghost lives there. The Manuak, or water ghost, was said to be the spirit of someone who had died tragically in the river. Drowned, caught in a sand pit, capsized boat, or a body that washed into the village. These spirits, according to the elders, never found peace. They'd gather at noon and at night, looking for someone with matching energy to die in their place, offering a life to the river god so they could finally reincarnate. Villagers claimed to hear splashes or laughter by the river in the dead of night. Frog catchers returning late often said they saw pale figures jumping into the water, laughing in strange, high-pitched voices. No one in our village ever went near the river during forbidden hours, except for a few stubborn folks. One of them was my uncle. Uncle D sounds spooky, right? But most people thought it was just superstition, until that day. Uncle D was the center of the story. He had a past. He'd been in and out of prison, known across the village as D-Flat. He hated superstitions, mocked spirits and gods, and once declared, "I've lived in Gia Lam all my life and never seen a ghost, just scared little kids." But fate doesn't care what you believe. It was a hot summer noon, 9 years ago. Uncle D and his younger brother, Uncle C, went out for a swim in the lake. Around noon, Uncle C wanted to go home for lunch, but D waved him off, saying he'd swim a bit longer. Unable to persuade him, C went home alone. Half an hour later, Uncle D hadn't returned. The family started to panic. Then suddenly he showed up, walking back from the riverside. His face was pale, his eyes empty. He walked like a man in a trance. He sat down in the yard, tilted his head to the sky, and burst out laughing. It was a horrible laugh, strange, raspy, and not his own. His eyes twitched. He mumbled things no one could understand. And then a voice came out of him, but it wasn't his. My grandmother screamed, "Who are you?" And the body turned slowly and replied with a broken, raspy voice, "I'm from Haiduong." Silence. My grandmother quietly muttered, "Manoch," and walked out the gate. No one knew where she went. The entity in Uncle D's body introduced himself as Nguyen, a traveling trader who had drowned in the flood of 1996. His soul had wandered the sandbank for nearly 20 years, until he found someone with matching energy to enter. Then, things spiraled out of control. He asked for porridge. They brought him a steaming hot bowl, but right before everyone's eyes, the porridge went cold and spoiled. Instantly, no one had seen him take a bite. He still said he was hungry. He crawled into the kitchen, lifted a 100-kilogram drum of corn, something that normally took 2 grown men, and casually threw it on his shoulder like it was weightless. That was no longer a man. Relatives tried to restrain him, but he tossed them aside like rag dolls. Everyone understood. Uncle D was no longer Uncle D. In the next part, I'll tell you how my tough grandmother returned to confront the spirit using ancient Vietnamese folk rituals, and how a new neighbor who forgot to honor the local spirits ended up hanging himself just days after moving in. My Hometown Cursed Land Part 8, The Mulberry Switch and the Ghost Rope. Can a mulberry branch and a bucket of children's urine scare away a ghost? It sounds insane, but in rural Vietnam, that's an old-school exorcism ritual, and bizarrely it works. It was a blazing summer afternoon. A man sat in the center of the courtyard, laughing like a lunatic, eyes rolled back white, skin ghost pale, muttering to someone no one else could see. Everyone backed away, except one person, my grandmother. She walked in calmly, holding 2 things in her hands, a thorny branch from a mulberry tree and a small bucket of baby urine. This episode continues right after the events of The Water Ghost, when my Uncle D was possessed, and now you'll see how my grandma fought back. That summer, Uncle D, my mother's youngest brother, wasn't himself. He sat shirtless in the courtyard, wearing only shorts. He didn't sweat, even under the scorching sun. His eyes were hollow, his mouth twisted into a giggle that didn't sound human. The whole family surrounded him in a wide circle, watching from a safe distance, afraid he might get up and walk straight into the river. Even the usually fearless family dog curled up in its cage, whimpering. Then, Grandma came home. She didn't ask questions. She didn't seem surprised. She raised the mulberry branch and shouted his name. D! 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 Each shout came with a lash across his back. Whatever was inside him started screeching. His eyes turned black, no whites left. At the 6th strike, it dropped to its knees and begged, "I'm sorry, I just need some money for the journey." Grandma didn't stop. On the 9th strike, Uncle D began to seize, foaming at the mouth, then collapsed. His wife screamed, "You killed my husband." But Grandma wiped the sweat from her face and said, "He's fine. I got it out." That night, they carried him inside, and the next morning he woke up, completely normal. The only thing he remembered, I was underwater, and then I was home. He never believed he was possessed, argued, cursed, just like always. But the horror wasn't over. A few months later, our neighbor, Ngok, my grandma's niece-in-law, started acting strange. That night, the dogs wouldn't stop barking. But it wasn't constant barking. It was spaced out, 1 bark at a time. Grandma said, 1 bark means ghost, 3 barks mean human. At around 1 a.m., we heard screaming from next door. I rushed outside. Ngok was standing beneath a grapefruit tree. She was trying to shove her head into a noose hanging from a branch. 3 adults were pulling her legs, trying to stop her. But she was too strong. Her mouth didn't speak. She just growled. A chilling, guttural sound. The porch light swayed in the wind, casting flickering shadows. The dogs howled. People were crying. It looked like a scene straight out of hell. Uncle D climbed the tree and cut the rope. Gok fell, face first onto the stone tiles. Blood dripped from her scalp. Then, Grandma walked over. She knelt down, parted Ngok's hair to see the wound. And Ngok's head twisted 180 degrees back to face her. While her body lay flat, she smiled. And in that dim light, we saw it. Her mouth was chewing on a live frog leg, still twitching. People screamed. Ngok tried to crawl back to the rope. They had to tie her up and drag her under the family altar. Grandma said, "That's a hanging ghost. She died by suicide and now looks for someone new to take with her. Anyone new who moves in without offering incense becomes a target. She feeds them live frogs and toads, makes them numb, easier to kill." Luckily, they caught her in time. Grandma lit 3 incense sticks, did the ritual until past 2 a.m. Ngok woke up. They rushed her to the clinic for stomach pumping. She lived. Today she's still next door, alive and well. But since that night, no one dares go near the grapefruit tree after dark. And the cursed spirits of this land, they've been around longer than you think. From my grandparents' haunted wedding, to the ghost that helped my grandma escape an asylum, to my grandfather's encounter with Haba, the river guardian spirit. But that's a story for next time. Haba of the Red River.